Hello, guys, and welcome back to Hockey on the Spot, Episode 2 with Brandon Barenfeld. Hello again, I'm Brandon Barenfeld. This is part 2 of Episode 2 of Hockey on the Spot, and in this part, we are going to look up some of the top trades that have happened during this offseason from June 12th to recently. And obviously, we did have some pretty big trades. The rights to defenseman Mark Streit going to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for forward Shane Harper, a good prospect, and a 2014 fourth-round pick. The Flyers then would sign Mark Streit to a 4-year contract. So good signing and trade acquisition for them. Adds a good power play quarterback. But we also had some other real good trades. Cal Clutterbuck being traded to and signing with the New York Islanders from the Minnesota Wild. They also got a 2013 third-round pick in that in exchange for former fifth overall pick Nino Niederreiter. Tyler Kennedy going to the San Jose Sharks for a draft pick, a good depth player. Andre Sekera going to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Jamie McBain and a second-round pick. Dave Bolland going to the Toronto Maple Leafs for a bunch of draft picks. That's a pretty big trade. And also Michael Frolik going to the Winnipeg Jets for a couple more draft picks. So Blackhawks trading away one of their best penalty killers from last year. Here, we had some pretty good trades here too. But today we're going to talk about just the top trades, in my opinion, starting with a trade that occurred just pretty much at the end of the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Goaltender Jonathan Bernier going to the Toronto Maple Leafs from the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for goaltender Ben Scrivens, forward Matt Fratton, and a second round pick in either 2014 or 2015, I believe, Toronto's choice. We've seen Jonathan Bernier. I think it's a great acquisition for Toronto, but this is a guy who has proven that he is very capable of being a starting goaltender. But when it became obvious a long time ago that Jonathan Quick was their guy, they had to move Bernier. There was no other option, but they couldn't move him until just this offseason. The day after Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals, he got moved. Jonathan Bernier got moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs and then signed a 3-year extension. So I think it's a good move. And now Toronto in a good situation with their goaltending. They have one guy now in Jonathan Bernier who's definitely ready for the starting role. And then they got another guy in James Reimer who is proven that he too can be a starting goaltender. He basically at times carried the Toronto Maple Leafs to the playoffs. I thought he was decent in the playoffs. Not great, but decent. And he has a lot of skill, so it's going to be an interesting battle for that starting position for sure. And going the other way, though, Ben Scrivens, a very capable backup goaltender. He'll most likely be the backup goaltender in LA for the upcoming year. But another guy who I'm interested to see become a potential starter at some point in his career, because I think Ben Scrivens is definitely capable. He did at times start over James Reimer, and he played pretty well when he did. So Ben Scrivens, I think, is going to go into training camp a competitor. He definitely will. And then forward Matt Fratton, a left winger, a guy who I personally don't know too much about, but based off what I've heard, is a very good player, a player who at one point was highly sought after by numerous teams, and a guy who will go into the season probably playing on like the third line, but I think over time, I think he definitely could become he definitely could become a second line player. He'll definitely look to become a top six guy. But for now, I think it's just a depth forward more than anything. Um, but he'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see him try to work his way to the top of the ranks in LA. And then, of course, that draft pick we talked about, second round, 2014 or 15, Toronto's choice. Another trade that I think kind of goes unnoticed, under the radar, but to me is going to prove to be a bigger trade than at first glance. A trade between the Calgary Flames and the Colorado Avalanche. Just a two-man deal both ways. Um, the Colorado Avalanche acquiring forward Alex Tanguay and defenseman Corey Sarich in exchange for forward David Jones and defenseman Shane O'Brien. I think it's a good trade both ways. For Alex Tanguay, not getting any younger, but a guy who still possesses a lot of skill and a guy who's familiar with the Colorado Avalanche system. Big part of their championship President's Trophy winning team back in 2000, 2001. Scored 2 goals in Game 7 against the New Jersey Devils. Was the #1 star of that game. And was always a very popular guy in Colorado. A guy who they never really wanted to see leave. So for Alex Tanguay, he goes back to his roots, returning to the place where he started his career and got drafted. So a guy who still possesses a lot of skill, very good playmaking abilities, very good wrist shot. Has the capabilities of both a sniper and a playmaker. So I think it's definitely a good move to return a familiar face and a Stanley Cup veteran to their team, especially if the rumors are true that Milan Hajduk will be leaving Colorado. They need that familiar face in their roster. So Alex Tanguay, I think, will prove to be the best player of anyone going anywhere in this trade. And then the other guy they get, Corey Sarich from the Calgary Flames, just a shutdown defenseman. To me, somewhat of an upgrade from Shane O'Brien. They lose a little bit in the way of physicality, but gain a little bit in the defensive play in the defensive zone. So Corey Sarich, good shutdown defenseman. Not a top 4 defenseman, but a solid player. And then going the other way, David Jones and Shane O'Brien. David Jones, he's never been a top point producer in this league, but he is a very solid goal scorer, solid 20 goal scorer, 20, 25 goal scorer. Not so much of a playmaker. This is a guy who, whenever he gets the puck, the first thing on his mind is to shoot. He will shoot the puck first before passing. A top 6 forward for sure for the Calgary Flames. But the question is, will he play on the top 6? It's very possible that he could play on the third line. So he definitely did in Colorado. So I think this is a guy who is going to be interesting. He'll fight to play on the second line. He won't be playing on the top line. That's pretty much a given. But he'll fight to play on the second line and hopefully not the third line. And then Shane O'Brien, again, a guy who is a downgrade as far as defensive play goes from Corey Sarich, but an upgrade as far as physicality goes. This is a roughhouse defenseman who drops the gloves. He's basically an enforcer on defense. And normally you like to keep the enforcing to the forwards, but it sometimes is good to have that one defenseman who's going to do that kind of thing. So I think Shane O'Brien definitely could definitely fill a need for the Calgary Flames. They need to be a little more physical on their blue line. So that's why I think it's a good acquisition for the Calgary Flames. Let's see. Another huge trade here. a very huge trade actually came at the 2013 NHL entry draft early on in the first round. The New Jersey Devils acquiring goaltender Corey Schneider from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a first-round draft pick. Which was the ninth overall pick, which Vancouver would use to select forward Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat from the London Knights, teammate of Max Domi's, scored the overtime winner to win the Ontario Hockey League Championship. So a guy who I think will fight to be a top six forward when he eventually does play in the NHL, but his time will have to wait. For Corey Schneider going to the New Jersey Devils, that came as a bit of a surprise to me. A lot of people believe that a deal was worked out with the Edmonton Oilers, and the Oilers definitely offered much more than what the Devils offered. But the reason that the Vancouver Canucks did not choose to send him to the Edmonton Oilers, despite that huge offer, is that they did not want to see a goaltender playing for a rival team and then getting like 30, 40 wins a season. Because Corey Schneider is a goaltender that will be expected to do that. Like Jonathan Bernier, a very capable starter who had been backup for a long time, kind of became the starter last season over Roberto Luongo. Luongo kind of had a rough season, and Schneider had a very good season. Um, so Vancouver unable to get Roberto Luongo out of Vancouver like they had initially wanted to because of that huge contract. So after signing Corey Schneider to a 3-year extension, they had to trade him, unfortunately. And for the New Jersey Devils, why it's actually pretty good for them, it allowed them to waive and buy out the final year of Johan Hedberg's contract. Up until then, the Devils had the oldest goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League. And for the New Jersey Devils, Marty Brodeur, pretty much he's entered. This is it. This is it for Marty Brodeur, folks. He's done, pretty much. This is the last year on his contract, and I'm pretty sure that after this year, he's going to call it quits, or that would be the smart thing for him to do. But it's pretty much coming to that point where maybe he's losing the luster he had for many years, and he's not really a big starter anymore. And I think Corey Schneider is a guy who could either become a good starting goaltender for the New Jersey Devils or push Marty Brodeur to have a great final season and have Corey Schneider start the next season. So it's going to be a very interesting situation in goal for the New Jersey Devils for sure. One of the many new faces coming into New Jersey for an offseason that's been the most active for for Lou Lamoriello and the New Jersey Devils in a very long time. So, we'll see. That'll be a good situation in goal for the New Jersey Devils. Another huge trade that happened this offseason, and probably the biggest trade this offseason, the biggest and quite frankly the most surprising in my opinion, a trade between the Dallas Stars and the Boston Bruins. The Dallas Stars, another team that's been very serious this offseason. They really want to get back in the playoff push, acquiring forwards Tyler Seguin and Rich Peverley from the Boston Bruins, as well as prospect defenseman Ryan Button in exchange for veteran sniper Louis Eriksson, prospect defenseman Joe Morrow, and prospect forwards Riley Smith and Matt Frazier. So good trade for both sides, in my opinion. With the Dallas Stars, they get a good center, former second overall pick back in 2010. Had a good season in 2011-12, but saw his numbers drop last season. So I think that it's a good trade. So Tyler Seguin looking to get a fresh start in Dallas. Rich Peverley, a good third-line center, shutdown player, but a guy who could also score a decent amount, make plays. And then Ryan Button, prospect defenseman, more of a shutdown kind of guy. It's going to be a long time, though, before he gets NHL action. And then going the other way, Louis Eriksson, the longtime member of the Dallas Stars, a pure sniper, a good scorer. And for the Boston Bruins, they have not had that kind of player in a long time. So for Louis Eriksson, they add a guy who has scoring ability and is considered, in my personal opinion, a scoring star. Not a superstar, but a star. And then, of course, Boston also getting some great prospects out of that. Joe Morrow, a top prospect, an offensive defenseman, a guy who could prove to be an excellent power play quarterback in the future. Riley Smith and Matt Frazier, both proving to be goal-scoring prodigies. Both have had some NHL experience already, and it would be interesting to see the two of them making the Boston Bruins. Dallas Stars, another trade of similar note, also getting Sean Horkoff from the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for defenseman Philip Larson and a 7th-round pick in 2016. Sean Horkoff, a good center veteran, but has issues with injuries, but when healthy is very good. And Philip Larson, a good shutdown defenseman and a good guy with good skating ability. And then the final trade of note that to talk about before we wrap this up, really huge trade this offseason. The Anaheim Ducks trading forward Bobby Ryan to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for forward Jakob Silfverberg, prospect forward Stefan Noesen, and a first-round pick in 2014. Bobby Ryan, the former 2nd overall pick back in 2005 behind Sidney Crosby, been an Anaheim Duck his whole career, but his time to leave Anaheim has been long overdue, and now the time has finally come. Not going to the Philadelphia Flyers like he wanted to, but goes to the Ottawa Senators and basically is going to go in being the guy to replace Danny Alfredsson. Get great skill, great hands, and definitely will most likely play on the top line with Jason Spezza and Milan Michalek at right wing. And then going the other way, Jakob Silfverberg, very skilled player from Sweden, solid 20-25 guy as far as goals go. And as a according to what many have said, pretty similar type player to Corey Perry, but faster than Corey Perry and not as big. So he won't be anywhere near as good as Corey Perry, but definitely will bring a good dimension to the Ducks, and it'll be obviously when you think 2 Corey Perrys on the same team, that's a dream come true. And then Stefan Noesen, of course, an excellent prospect, a hard worker, pretty similar type player to Rick Nash. Not as big as Rick Nash, and who knows if he'll be as good as Rick Nash, but definitely possesses the skills to be a top 6 forward. And then, of course, Anaheim will definitely be hoping for Ottawa to play poorly this year, so that first-round pick could be higher. Of course, there were some other solid trades too. Devin Setoguchi going to Winnipeg, and Henrik Talinder going back to the Buffalo Sabres for prospect Riley Boychuk. All right, guys, and that is pretty much it. And one more trade, actually, too. Significant note, David Perron going to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for forward Magnus PRV and a 2nd-round pick in 2014. Pretty good trade for both sides. David Perron, solid goal scorer, and Magnus PRV, with his solid skill. And then, of course, Danny Carcillo going to the Los Angeles Kings for 2015 conditional pick, a 4th-line player. All right, guys, and that'll do it for today's episode of Hockey on the Spot. For next time, starting tomorrow, August is going to be big, covering the 30 teams in 30 days. I don't know which team I'll be doing tomorrow. I will be following NHL.com's schedule. So it's going to be fun, though. August is going to be a fun month for this series. But until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, and have a great day.